They didn't knock. They didn't call. I walked outside one morning and my car was just gone. No warning, no notice, just a tow truck speeding away with one of the last things I truly owned. Why? Because the HOA claimed it was too old to fit their image. But they messed with the wrong guy. What started as a quiet complaint turned into a legal chess match, and by the end, I wasn't just a homeowner. I was their boss. This story is about justice, revenge, and taking back control from the people who think they own your life. Stick around. It's a story you're not going to want to miss. And if you enjoyed this one, be sure to click subscribe, because tomorrow, we have another special story for you. Just as requested, I moved into that neighborhood with nothing but a few boxers, my work tools, and my old truck. It wasn't flashy or expensive. It was a 2004 Dodge Ram, faded red with a few scratches, but it was mine. That truck got me through some of the hardest years of my life. When I left the city behind to start over, it carried everything I owned. And now, parked in my new driveway, it felt like a small symbol that I had finally made it somewhere better. At first, everything seemed fine. Quiet streets, trimmed lawns, and the kind of silence people pay extra for. I kept to myself mostly, waved at a few neighbors, and focused on settling in. But then, about a week in, I found a note tucked under my windshield. A printed letter from the HOA, taped shut in a plastic sleeve. Vehicle does not meet aesthetic standards. Must be relocated within 72 hours. I laughed at it. I thought it was some kind of mistake. There were cars older than mine on the block. One guy even had a rusty camper van parked by the curb. I ignored it. 3 days later, another note. This one had red print at the top. Final warning. Apparently, my truck was considered a visual blight. Too old, unfit for community image, detracts from neighborhood value. I shook my head, balled it up, and tossed it in the trash. I wasn't hurting anyone. I parked in my own driveway. I paid my dues, and no one had even bothered to knock on my door or say something to my face. Then it happened. One morning, I stepped outside to grab coffee and head to work, and the truck was gone. At first I thought it was stolen. My heart was in my throat. I checked the street, asked the neighbors, even ran to the corner, thinking maybe I parked it somewhere else. Nothing, just empty pavement and a few judgmental eyes peeking through curtains. I called the police. They told me it had been towed by request of the neighborhood HOA. Warning, no call, no paperwork, just gone. I stood there in disbelief, gripping my coffee cup like it could explain something. That truck was more than a vehicle. It was the last piece of my old life, the only thing that had never let me down, and they took it from me like it was garbage. That was the moment something snapped inside me. I didn't know how yet, but one thing was for sure. This wasn't over. Not even close. Here's chapter 2. Everyone knew, except me. Max 500 words. Same emotional, clear, and human storytelling style. The first call I made was to the towing company. They told me the vehicle was picked up on behalf of the neighborhood association. No ticket, no city involvement, just a private request. I asked who authorized it, and they gave me the name I already expected: Karen, the HOA president. I called her right away. No answer. So I showed up at the HOA office. The assistant there barely looked up from her desk. When I asked why my car was towed, she just said there were multiple complaints filed. It was a community decision. Community decision. I'd lived there for less than a month. Nobody had talked to me about anything. I asked to see the complaints. She told me they were confidential. And just like that, I was shut out. I tried city code enforcement next. They told me it was private property. Nothing illegal had been done. The HOA had discretionary power. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These people had taken my car without notice, and everyone was just fine with it. That week I started noticing the looks. Neighbors I'd waved to suddenly avoided eye contact. People who smiled at me when I moved in now crossed the street when I walked by. I passed a group of women near the mailboxes and heard one of them mutter, "Should have known better." It was like everyone knew something I didn't, and it felt like I was being punished for it. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus. My mind kept replaying it all. The notes, the silence, the disappearance. The smug way that assistant told me it was a community decision. It felt like I'd stepped into some twisted version of suburbia, where smiling faces hid knives behind their backs. So I started digging. I pulled out the HOA handbook they gave me on Marvin Day and read every word. Then I started looking into state property laws, resident rights, towing regulations. I even read court cases involving abusive HOS, and the deeper I went, the clearer it became. Something wasn't right. The HOA was acting way outside the bounds of its authority. They needed board approval for actions like towing. They needed written notice, due process. But none of that had happened. Then I found a clause buried in the bylaws, stating that any action against a resident must be documented with proper notice and review. And there had to be proof of complaints. Real signatures, real names. But I hadn't seen a single one. That's when the anger turned into something sharper. I wasn't just some guy with an old truck anymore. I was a target, and I was starting to realize the people in charge weren't just overstepping. They were hiding something. Here's Chapter 3. Behind closed doors, written in the same clear, emotional, and engaging tone. Max 400 words. I knew something was off. The more I read through the HOA rules, the more cracks I found. But what really lit the fire was a chance conversation with an elderly neighbor named Mr. Willis. He'd lived on the block for over 30 years and wasn't shy about his opinions. He told me, this neighborhood didn't used to be like this not until Karen took over. Karen, HOA president, always in control, always watching, always smiling that tight. Fake smile like she was hiding something behind her teeth. With a little digging, I found out Karen hadn't just received complaints about my truck. She wrote them herself. Multiple reports, all conveniently anonymous, all filed from the same IP address at nearly the same time. She forged signatures too. Claimed a neighbor named Linda complained Linda had moved out months ago. It got worse. Karen had bypassed required board votes, misused HOA funds, and made decisions without any oversight. There were budget approvals signed with names that didn't match the board roster. It wasn't just about me or my truck anymore. It was about control. That's when I called my old friend, Marcus. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew he'd passed the bar recently and had started handling small property law cases. I told him everything. Marcus didn't hesitate. Document everything. Every letter, every complaint, every date and time. No confrontation, just evidence. So I did. I printed screenshots, saved emails, filed public records requests. Marcus helped me write up formal inquiries, quiet ones, so Karen wouldn't catch on. At night, I stayed up compiling it all. My living room became a wall of files and timelines. I wasn't planning revenge. I was building a case. And with every folder I filled, I stopped feeling like the powerless guy whose car got towed. I started feeling like someone they underestimated. The HOA had their little kingdom, but they had no idea what was coming. Here's Chapter 4. The Power Play, written in the same clear, emotionally grounded style, under 400 words. They thought I'd just move on, that I'd let it go, like everyone else did before me. But I wasn't like the others. I didn't just want my car back. I wanted accountability. Using their own bylaws, I filed to run for a position on the HOA board. They probably laughed when they saw my name on the ballot. Just the new guy with the ugly truck. But what they didn't realize was that over the past few weeks, I'd been quietly talking to my neighbors, the ones Karen ignored, fined, or silenced. Turns out, I wasn't the only one tired of her games. Some told me about broken fences she refused to fix, surveillance cameras pointed at their windows, random citations with no reason. I listened. I didn't make big promises, I just told the truth. When election day came, I stood in the back of the room, watching the votes get counted. Karen sat at the front, smiling like she always did, confident and smug. Then her smile cracked. I won. Not by a landslide, but by enough. Enough to matter. And it didn't stop there. The evidence Marcus and I had collected, I handed it to the oversight committee right after the vote. Emails, financials, forged complaints, it was all there. Within a week, Karen and 3 board members were suspended, pending review. 2 weeks later, they were removed by community vote. That's how fast it unraveled. Now, I was sitting in the same chair Karen once used to bully people, and the first rule I passed: no more surprise towing ever. After that, I submitted termination letters for every vendor and contractor tied to the abuse. The towing company, gone. Karen's cousin's security firm, gone. Anyone who played a part in manipulating residents was out. This wasn't revenge. It was restoration. For the first time since I moved in, I felt like the neighborhood was mine, too, and it was just getting started. Here's Chapter 5, the driveway victory, written in the same clear, emotional, and satisfying tone, under 300 words. The day my car came back felt like more than just a delivery, it felt like a statement. The flatbed truck lowered it gently into my driveway, just like it had never been gone. But I had changed, and so had everything else. It wasn't just about the car, it never was. It was about the way they made me feel like I didn't belong, like I wasn't welcome in my own neighborhood. They tried to make me invisible, but I refused to stay quiet. Now, I drive through the same streets where they once whispered behind curtains, the same streets where warning notes once showed up on my windshield. But now, neighbors wave, some even apologize. The silence has been replaced by something new: respect. The HOA isn't what it used to be. No more secret meetings. No more surprise fines. No more towing without warning. We made it fair again. Not perfect, but honest. Sometimes I still park in that same spot, right in front of my house, just because I can. I look around and remember how close I was to giving up. But I didn't. I stood my ground, even when it felt like no one was standing with me. They took my car like I didn't matter. So I took their titles and reminded them who really owns the street.